All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Aware Athlete Show. Today's guest is six-time world Ironman champion, Mark Allen. And Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Scott.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have you. So I thought I'd ask you a few questions. Maybe some of them you haven't been asked before. A lot of them you probably have. But my first one is, I know I've followed you for a long time, and I know you're very intelligent about your entire training program, the way you approach training, the way you approach life. So here's a question that's actually very related to that. I think it's actually pretty important. But I know a lot of triathletes and even top triathletes have had accidents while training on the bike with cars and circumstances like that. And sometimes it has really set them back severely. And in terms of your entire career, I'm not saying you've never crashed on the bike, but you've pretty much avoided that. What has been your approach to that bike training that allowed you to avoid any of those cataclysmic, career shortening or ending accidents that a lot of people have had, and it's very dangerous out there?
Yeah, well, one strategy that I employed is that I rode my bike in the 80s and 90s. Back when I was training, there were less cars, there were no cell phones, and I think that nowadays there's just a lot more traffic everywhere, and with the distraction of cell phones and people talking on phones and looking at their text messages, it's just more dangerous. And then on top of that, it seems like there's less, depending on where you're at, there seems to be kind of like not a real good tolerance for bikes. Like I've had,
That's true.
I've had people that I coach be actually, people aggressively trying to hit them on country roads, places where there's plenty of room. There's no reason why there should be anything other than the car going around the cyclist. And so, to be honest, I'm actually fairly nervous about riding on the roads these days. And I think that, there's so many great options to avoid having to be on the roads much. One is for sure, lots of indoor riding platforms that you can get great workouts on. Zwift and a lot of other platforms out there. Gravel racing has become really popular, and that, talk about an amazing workout, and one that's maybe even for sure probably safer, let's say, than mountain biking, where gravel, you're actually kind of on roads, but they're gravel as opposed to single track trails with roots and things that, if you stick me on a mountain bike, I guarantee you I will crash, and so I think people just have to be more selective on the roads that they choose to go on if they're going to be outside. It seems to be safer if you're riding with a few people. One cyclist by themselves, cars don't give you much leeway a lot of times, but if there's 3 or 4 of you, then they will go around you. And then, explore other options too, just for safety reasons. Yeah.
Okay. So that would be, if you were training competitively right now, that would be a major consideration for you, though.
It would be. It would be. And when I raced, I chose areas that were pretty bike friendly. I trained in Boulder, Colorado. I trained in San Diego, California, and Boulder is still pretty good, but people have been hit there more and more frequently, just because of the volume of cars. And then San Diego, a lot of the roads that I used to ride on that were pretty nice country roads are now basically, they got swallowed up by cities. So there's a lot more traffic. There's some amazing places. There's some amazing places still left to train, beautiful roads in different states in the US, and certainly over in Europe, a lot of great training places, but you just have to be smart about it.
Yeah. So Europe is a little better environment for bikes then.
That's my experience. Yeah. I did a lot of training in France, and you'd be on these little roads and, not much room to pass, and a car would come up behind you. And if there wasn't room, they just patiently go, 10, 15 miles an hour until there was a little space, and then they go around you. You never had this feeling like, they wanted to just shove you off the road and get on with their drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely do get that feeling here sometimes. So
Mhm.
another question. I think if I have this right, you said it was not really until your last championship race in 1995 that you got your nutrition dialed in.
Mhm.
And as we know, in an endurance event, you're doing two things to the body at once. You're taking the blood to the working muscles and away from the digestive system, and at the same time, you're demanding calories. So that's tricky for I think anybody. I think anybody would probably benefit from your answer to how did you do that? How did you get that dialed in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I raced the Ironman in Hawaii 12 times. 11 of those times I got sick to my stomach and threw up. So, and it was only that 12th time, the final Ironman that I did, that I actually got the nutrition right. And part of it was that the products that we had back in the 80s and 90s were pretty archaic compared to what you have now. On the surface, they look the same: sport drinks, energy bars, but the formulations are so much better now, and they've really dialed in a lot of the science in terms of being able to give you calories in a mix of different length chains of carbohydrate that actually work together to help get it into your gut when your gut isn't working at very optimal levels. So things are more absorbable, in other words, now.
Yeah.
And and we also didn't have really the science of how much you could actually take in. And in the first years that I was racing Kona, I kind of tried to do the math on how many calories I was burning and tried to sort of per hour, and tried to kind of get close to matching that, so that hopefully when I got to the marathon, I'd have energy left over. Well, that number was way too big. I was trying to get in on the bike 450, 500 calories an hour.
Yeah.
And that's basically impossible to do, especially when your digestive system is working at 50% or whatever. And so in that final Ironman, I actually stopped trying to have my sort of race plan, and I just went with how my body was feeling. And so I ended up probably taking in somewhere around 350 calories an hour, which is, they say, kind of the top of what you can absorb.
Yeah.
And it worked perfectly. And then I was also not worrying about getting dehydrated, because I had seen over the years that, with an aid station every 5 miles on the bike, an aid station every mile on the run, you can grab so much fluid that you're just floating in liquid, and by the end of the race, all those earlier years, my legs were blown up like balloons, because I just had so much fluid in my body, and the sodium levels weren't quite right, and all that kind of stuff. So in that final one, I also backed off on the total amount of liquid that I took in, and probably was taken in somewhere around 30 ounces, around a liter, something like that, an hour. And that year, my energy levels were perfect all the way through the race. I didn't feel sick to my stomach once. And I was using the same products that I had used in a couple of Ironmans previous, but it was just that finally the amount was something that my body could manage. So those are real key things. One is finding something that you like, because just because a product is popular does not mean that it will work in your body. You have to test it, test stuff on long bike rides, test stuff during long runs when all the blood's in your legs and it's not in your stomach. See if you can absorb it, and then really dial in the amount that you need per hour in terms of calories, how many calories an hour you need in longer days, and then to sustain your energy. And then also figuring out, kind of keeping track of how much total fluid you can take in per hour during a long day, a long bike ride, and making sure that you do not overdo that with all of those aid stations.
Yeah, I hadn't realized there was an aid station every 1 mile in the marathon.
Yeah, and think about it. When I did my long runs, I might stop once at a water fountain in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and get a drink of water. And all of a sudden, I'm going from maybe getting 8 ounces in 2.5 hours to getting in 4 ounces every mile. It's just like it adds up. And you can actually train your body to absorb more per hour, both calories and fluid. if you do it in training, but I wasn't doing it in training. So when I got to the race and those aid stations were there every mile, I had to really dial back what I was taking, the amount that I was taking in, so that my body could still manage it.
So you skipped some of the aid stations?
I didn't skip them. I just didn't take in much at each one.
Yeah.
No, I was definitely looking forward to each aid station. Getting a little sip of a little bit of calories, a little bit of water. I had sodium tablets with me that I could suck on from time to time when I felt like my body needed more sodium.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep up with the electrolytes.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's fascinating. You had actually accepted. You actually do need that many calories an hour, but you can't get them during an event like that. And so you have to find the calories that will keep you going, not the ones that are actually what your body would like to have. Say if you were working at a very slow intensity,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you were, if you were walking for 8 hours, then you could take in more calories, and your body might like that. Yeah, so you were able to just realize, that this is what I need to get through the event optimally, rather than what my body has really burned and needed. That's fascinating. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a math equation, but if you kind of look at it from the numbers, when you're going hard, you can burn about 700 calories an hour,
Mm-hmm.
but you can only absorb about 350 in the form of carbohydrate per hour. So you're at a carbohydrate deficit. If you were burning all carbohydrates, you would be at a deficit of about 350 calories per hour. So how do you make up for that deficit? You have to be able to utilize fat for fuel. And so that's where, a lot of my training was designed around that, to build that aerobic fat burning engine, so that even when I was at race pace in an Ironman, I was still aerobic at your maximum aerobic heart rate, at the point where you're still aerobic and not going into anaerobic physiology. You're getting about half your calories from fat and half from carbohydrates. So when I was working in the race at, let's say, 155 beats a minute, that was my max aerobic heart rate. I was burning about half my calories from fat, 350 an hour, and the other 350 was coming from carbohydrates. So basically, I was replacing the carbohydrates that I was burning, and the deficit was actually being made up with fat metabolism. So I, in essence, wasn't going into any kind of deficit. Now, if I had gone a lot harder, I would have been burning a much higher percentage of calories from carbohydrate, and eventually I'd burn through all of my glycogen, and then at that point, you're going to slow way down, because when you go into anaerobic physiology, it tends to shut down your fat burning. And so when you go through all your glycogen, if you're not replacing it quick enough, you go through it and you can't even utilize fat, even if you slow down, because that's kind of shut off. So that's when, people bonk at mile 20 of the marathon, because you have about 2,000 calories worth of glycogen in your body. And, you burn 100 calories an hour or a mile when you're running a marathon, roughly. Yeah. So at mile 20, if you're just blasting through and you haven't taken in many carbohydrate calories, you really are going to just hit the wall and bonk.
So I know that you use the Maffetone training method a lot, and Phil Maffetone does recommend eating a lot of fats in your diet. Did you do a lot of that?
A lot of eating a lot of fat is a relative term. I don't eat let's say a keto diet. I have what I think is a little bit pretty balanced. I mean, every meal has definitely some protein in it. Every meal has a good source of oils in it, and every meal has a certain amount of carbohydrate that's coming from either vegetables or from beans, or from some whole product. I try to avoid excessive carbohydrate. I try to avoid. I basically don't eat much bread anymore. But yeah, I was more of a balanced kind of diet person. Anything in extreme, I felt like there's going to be a plus and there's going to be a minus to it.
Yeah.
And, I've seen that play out with any kind of diet that anybody's dreamed up. If something is extreme, there's going to be some aspect that will give you a big boost in one part of your health, and there's going to be another part that's going to suffer from it. And, like if somebody is on let's say a keto diet, they're probably going to be pretty low on fiber. Fiber is what your gut needs to keep healthy gut biome. And if you don't have that, your whole system's going to be screwed up. So, it may have looked like I ate a lot of fat, like I put butter on my toast. I had olive oil on everything. I ate a ton of avocados. And back then, all of that wasn't that popular. Now that's what everybody does.
Yeah. So when you were talking about your racing strategy there with dialing in the nutrition and your glycogen stores, you're basically talking about smart race pacing, and then beyond that, you're actually talking about gaining a greater awareness of what is actually going on at a certain time, which I think is a little bit more universal application of that. But so when you were doing your Ironman races, you would use a heart rate monitor on the bike frequently, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you switched to the marathon, and I'm not sure you wore the heart rate monitor, and I'm not sure how relevant it was, because that's the last event. And if you're going for the win, you still need smart pacing. You still need to be a little bit aware of what's going on inside yourself. But did you try to hold that at 155 beats during them? When I've read your description of racing against Dave Scott, it was just matching him that last couple hours.
Yeah, I used the heart rate monitor on the bike to make sure that I wasn't going too hard, because you're tapered, you're fresh, you're in the Ironman. This day has come that you've been training for and thinking about all season. And it's very easy to get overexcited in the first part of the bike, first 3 hours, let's say, and to go too hard, especially when you come out of the water. I mean, every year I'd come out of the water and guys would take off like they were doing an Olympic distance bike ride. I thought that they were going as fast as they would go in a 40K. And I'm like, if I do that, I'll blow up. And all those guys would blow up. They might have a great bike ride, but somewhere on the marathon, they'd blow up. And so I knew I needed to really manage my pace on the bike so that I would set up a good marathon. And ultimately, that's what the entire day was about for me, was managing my pace, managing my training, managing my nutrition so that I could have a great marathon. Because, if you look at the three disciplines in the sport, the difference between a good and a great swim in Kona was going to be 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes. The difference between a good and bad bike ride might be 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. But the difference between a good and bad marathon can be an hour, hour and a half. So those differences just magnify. And so then when I got to the marathon, I pretty much threw off the heart rate monitor, because at that point it was like, if my heart rate is too high, I don't want to know that, because I'm going too hard. And if my heart rate is too low, that means that I'm out of fuel and I'm going to have to start walking. And I didn't really want to know either of those things. All I knew is I wanted to win the race, go beyond the numbers, and put together something that would enable me to cross that finish line in first place. And so at that point of the race, I was already pretty much kind of like in a very different mindset and way of sensing and being aware of things. Like when I was running next to Dave, I could feel when he was strong. I could feel when he was doubting himself. I could feel when he was basically invincible too, and so it's not like I had to turn to him and go, "Hey, Dave, how you feeling now?" You could sense it.
I know you're that close to somebody.
Yeah, you're just in a very different state of awareness at that point of the race from your normal everyday thing. And so not having that heart rate monitor also sort of freed me to just find that extra something that maybe there's no other way I could have found. to get the energy that I needed to then be able to match Dave's pace or catch Thomas Hellriegel or stay in the lead when I had built a good lead.
Yeah. So all that aerobic training and then that smart, all the aerobic training that you've done throughout the year and all that and the smart pacing up to the marathon pretty much prepares you to just do whatever you have to do at that point, as long as you're a little smart about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go sprinting the first mile of the marathon. Obviously I'm still pacing it, but pacing it from a very different mindset.
Yeah. Didn't Dave Scott run a 5:58 for the first mile of the marathon in 89?
The first few miles were around 5:50. Yeah.
5:50. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is absolutely insane and nuts. But I thought, well, he knows what he's doing. I may as well just try it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. That's great. So talking about dialing things in, I think that's, again, to apply that really broadly, that's what life's about. But dialing things in, you've recently made to wrap this up a little bit, this part of it, some comments about the Norwegians and the latest group of triathletes to burst off onto the scene and kind of rewrite the sport a little bit. And you've mentioned how they dialed everything in. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, everybody when Gustav Eden went 740 something in his first Ironman in Florida, and then Christian Blumenfeld in Cozumel goes 721 or something. Granted, not an official fastest Ironman time because the course wasn't quite measured right, but nonetheless very impressive. Both those two guys. Everybody was like, "What are they doing?" And I saw I've seen some video and comments from mostly from Christian, and basically they're not doing anything out of the ordinary or extraordinary or groundbreaking. They're just making sure that every base is covered. They're working on that aerobic base. They're figuring out what heart rate he can work at and build that fat burning endurance engine so that he can conserve the carbohydrates for when he has to go fast. They're figuring out the pace that he can go on the bike so that he doesn't blow up on the run. They're figuring out how many calories an hour he can take in. They're figuring out when he starts to burn too much carbohydrate. They're figuring out how hard he can go without elevating his core temperature so much that it starts to inhibit his performance. And these are all things that I did, but from a much more intuitive standpoint. I didn't have all of the things to measure all of this stuff, but it was exactly what I was dialing in as well. And it's actually what everybody should be dialing in. The thing that they're doing differently, I think, is that they're not just looking at one or two things. They're looking at every single measurable piece and making sure that each one is optimized. And those small differences make a huge difference. Like the final Ironman that I raced was against Thomas Hellriegel, and I beat him by about 2.5 minutes, which sounds like, that's a good margin. But if you figure it as a percent of the total amount of time we race each other over that day, it was something like less than 0.5%. And so less than 0.5%. If you can get 1% or 2% more, that becomes huge. If you get 3% more, that's massive, And so all of those individual aspects, when dialed in, puts together this package that, Gustav and Christian, they went out there, they crushed their first Ironman distance race, and everybody's like,
yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So putting it all together, I don't think you can replace awareness and your intuitive approach with anything. But I have been kind of surprised sometimes. They talk about the talk test when you're running, and my heart rate monitor is giving me a little bit different data than what I think might be easy if I wasn't using it. So it's it's all of this teamwork approach works.
Yeah, I think if you use the numbers to then match it with feelings and sensations that you have, That's where you have the real sweet spot of potential being unfolding for you. If you're just using the numbers and you're not matching it with sensations and feelings, and you're not really going to be able to optimize the benefit of those numbers. And also, ultimately, you still got to deal with yourself. You still got to deal with periods in the race where you might want to feel like I want to quit. You might have conversations that are negative self-talk that you've got to just stop on the spot and get back into a more centered, quiet focus. And those type of things aren't, they're not as measurable, and probably they're not, I don't know if they're a part of the Norwegian protocol or not, but if there's something that every athlete should be thinking about and integrating into their training. How am I going to get my mind to be quiet when it's going nuts out there on the race course? How am I going to practice that in training? How am I going to keep myself in a quiet, steady focus where I'm in flow as opposed to in resistance to what's going on? How am I going to get myself out of that mental state where I want it to be different than it is right now, but I can't change how it is right now because this is how it is. So how do I change my mind?
Yeah.
How do I change my awareness? Where do I go within myself to find that internal space that is not affected by going fast or going slow? It's just a place of flow where I just am doing 100% full engagement at the best level that I can in this step and the next step and the next step.
Right. So that is in essence, there's nothing that replaces self-awareness. And that is in essence what really dialing it in is. And I've never raced an Ironman, but I've had a lot of circumstances in life where you have to be quiet. That's all you can do. And you go to work and you're required to go to work sick and you have no energy. And you just have to, you can kind of manufacture energy by just stop, just be there right now. And in small things, I've had experiences running up a hill where, why it's hard running up this hill. And then you realize I'm doing what I want to do. So it's just, that's dialing it in. And I think that's what your book, Fit Soul, Fit Body is really about. It has a lot of things in there, 9 keys to a happier, healthier you. So there, you got a little framework there, the 9 keys. And it actually has an introduction to weight training and an introduction to training in terms of how to start incrementally and a lot of things in there. But it's really about the inspiring stories, the things you learn from your races and your relationship with Brant Secunda, and what you learned from his training with the Huichol Indians and the value of nature. And so I am in a place where I am fortunate enough to go outside every day and see the trees and have the sunshine in my eyes, and I'm surrounded by mountains. And I go out there, I've been in the house for a few hours. I go out there and my eyes open and I say, gosh, I can't even believe how beautiful it is here. Can you comment on how valuable nature is for us?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main keys in our book, is developing a relationship with the spiritual world of nature. Human beings are hardwired to feel good when you are outside. We are not hardwired to feel good when we're in a shopping mall. That's a modern thing, and it disconnects us from energy. There's so much energy in nature, and that's part of what Brant teaches are very simple practices that can allow you to deepen your relationship with nature and to use nature to help you feel better, to relieve stress, to gain energy. Like you just said, you go outside and you look at the mountains or the trees and you just go, wow. And in that moment of wow, you forget about problems, you feel good, you have made a connection with a sunrise, a sunset, a mountaintop, a lake, the trees. And it literally does give you energy. Canada actually just announced a government policy that said that being in nature heals everything, any kind of disease, everything. They have announced it as a public tool for helping people get healthier. Go outside in nature. And so for a nation's government to have this be part of their health policy, I think that's ancient wisdom being brought into the modern world and being re-recognized that we're part of this natural world and we're hardwired to be healthier and happier when we immerse ourselves in it. You know, trees have they have things that help stimulate our immune system. You know, so trees, being around trees are helping us to have a stronger immune system. How crazy is that? South Korea planted these parks in the cities where they have certain trees that they planted that they have shown can help heal different aspects of mental health and different diseases. And so that people can actually get out of the buildings, go into these parks, be immersed in these trees and this natural environment, even in the city, as a tool for staying healthy. And so anyway, that's one of the keys in our book is developing your relationship with the world of nature. And it sounds sort of new agey, but it's actually ancient wisdom. You know, any traditional culture would look at you like, well, of course, you know, you sit on a mountaintop and you breathe in the air, your mind is going to be clear and you're going to feel better. Of course, it's, you know, it wouldn't even be a question.
Yeah, for sure. So there is actually scientific evidence about something they call earthing, where you've heard of that?
No.
You actually take your shoes off and walk on the ground for, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, more, less. But there's actually some evidence that actually prevents disease and injury. And because we are electrical beings and we wear insulated shoes all the time, always insulated from the ground, never touching the ground, which is our source of first source of contact with the earth. I mean, our feet. And even putting your hands on the ground for a few minutes or gardening it actually has a physical effect on your body. And I think most people who have done long distance hikes find them completely life-changing in some way or another. So let me ask you, that's about being in contact with the environment. Let me ask you a little bit about, so our environment involves, we're social beings too. It involves community. I know you've talked about that a little bit. Just wondering what community means to you today, and maybe how many friends have you maintained from your racing days and throughout your career?
Yeah, community is such a huge part of health. When we're with other people, our problems seem less. You know, when we're alone by ourselves and isolated, the world can feel overwhelming, and it can lead to depression and suicide and, all things that don't help people out. Of course, there's value in having quiet time by yourself to reflect. However, like if how it is, you can be having a lousy day and then you meet some friends and you do a run in the evening and you're all joking and laughing and goofing and talking, and all of a sudden you just feel so much better. And that's that community. And traditional cultures like the Huichol people in Mexico, again, for them it's just second nature. Like, well, of course you want to be around a lot of people, your family, your friends, your relatives, your extended family, your extended family. They don't have that thing of privacy like we do, because they all live in a very close community. They also don't have a lot of the problems we do. They don't have child abuse. They don't have they basically don't have like depression. They get sad, like if somebody dies or whatever. They don't have Alzheimer's. They don't have a lot of the diseases that we get that are associated with sort of normal aging. And a lot of that is that community. Have I kept in contact with my triathlon community? Interestingly, when I moved away from San Diego, I live in Santa Cruz, California now. Once I was sort of geographically removed from a lot of my crew, those friendships sort of just went away. And it's like, geez, I guess not all of them, but a lot of them did. And I realized we had certain aspects in common, but it was circumstantial as opposed to just that real deep core thing. But there are those who I have kept in contact with that I see periodically. And ironically, even though Dave Scott and I were fierce competitors during the day, we've become pretty close friends. We don't really get together, but we are in the same place a lot of times, and we talk on the phone periodically. And we had such an intense rivalry, but it was a healthy one in the sense that we wanted to beat each other because we saw that each other was sort of elevating the standard. And it wasn't like we wanted to beat each other because we thought the other one was a jerk. That's kind of an unhealthy rivalry. And so once the years passed and, we both had kids and we both got divorced and, had a lot of similar life experience stuff going on, we've really actually become a lot closer, which is really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. I've listened to and watched some of your interviews together, and I don't sense any, animosity when you're talking. No. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's always the way it is. You need community and you need your current community, but only a few people in your lifetime make that deep impact.
Yeah.
And there's a few people I've taken away from other experiences that I'm still quite in touch with. So let's go to your website a little bit. And one thing I love is that when I go to your website every year or two, whatever, take another look at it, I see that, to me, you're evolving. And I love that. And I see now that you have on your menu on the top of your page, you have life coaching. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we kind of call it life coaching, but I call it personal performance coaching in the sense of helping people look at the bigger picture of their life and, kind of figure out what are the things that have meaning for them? What are some of the things that they feel are holding them back, that give them resistance, and sort of helping give them just simple tools and practices that they can implement to try and start to make shifts, so that and nothing that I should back up. We try to just have like an initial conversation where the person just tells me about themselves, and out of that, it's just very organic what starts to evolve that we begin to work on together. And so initially, I have a call once a week, and then it goes to once every other week for a couple months. And then after that, it's like you're kind of on your own, but we can set up time as you need. And it's not like I send people, a questionnaire with 30 questions that they have to answer, because that tends to drive people in a specific direction. And they tend to put down answers that they think I might want to hear. And if we just start having a conversation, stuff comes up that's very organic, and maybe it's just one little thing. And so you start, peeling the layers off of that. And all of a sudden you see, 10 things, and they are able to see 10 things that they knew there was something in there that wasn't quite right, but they weren't quite sure what it was. And they didn't know quite how to manage it or look at it or handle it or put it in a different perspective. And I just try to help them really evolve their process. It's not like I'm doing anything exactly. And I'm not trying to save the world or tell anybody that I've got the answer to everything. But I just like to draw from my experiences, because doing well at triathlon was not about, I didn't ultimately do well at triathlon because I got really good at training. I did well at triathlon because I got really good at managing my life, myself, and becoming, I don't even know if I want to put it in these words, but becoming fluent at dealing with myself. And ultimately, once I was able to do that, then everything else just fell in place. Things fall in place easier. And the challenges never stop coming. You know, I quit racing. That doesn't mean the challenges stop. They just keep coming. That's life. But then taking lessons from the past and going, how would I apply that thing that I learned at Ironman in this situation in my work, or in this situation with a relationship, everything is very simple, how I work with people in the personal coaching. And I really like it because it is broad. It's not just telling people do 8 quarters on the track. You know, I can tell them how to train, but I really like helping them discover how to become more of themselves.
Yeah. I think that is the one thing that's missing from the entire idea of fitness in this country is self-development. I call it self-awareness, but you know, all these boutique places that have the boot camp sign up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't live your whole life as a boot camp.
Right.
At some point you break.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think one of the things that inspired me to write my book was that I was working in physical therapy, and the place that I was working in had a gym also, and it's a great combination. Get done with physical therapy, get a gym membership. But then I saw a lot of people would go and do what they're told to do, or they get into a group class and move from one station to another in 30 seconds, but they weren't getting better. And or they weren't getting better over the years, and they weren't really improving their balance or reversing entropy a little bit. And so, because they're just doing what they're told, and they're not really developing what you've talked about, you know, that sense of themselves. So,
well, that's the awareness piece. You know, you can run all your entire life. You can either do it in one of two ways. You can either run without awareness, and if you do, you'll probably end up, you know, everybody's body has a little imbalance in it. And so, yes, you know, let's say all you do is run, and you're not really running with awareness. You're just doing the same thing over and over and over. Well, in the beginning, that little imbalance doesn't show up as anything. You might not even know it's there. And then as you put on the years and the miles, you start to dig a rut on one side, kind of metaphorically. Next thing you know, one side keeps getting injured, and you keep trying to do the same thing over and over and over. Then there's the other type of runner who is always trying to bring more awareness or more fluidity or more efficiency into how they're moving their body. So even though they're running just like their partner over here, the person who's running with awareness is always moving slightly different than they did the day before, because they are evolving who they are and how they move, and how their relationship with their body and their relationship with their environment. And they tend to be the ones who are almost never injured because they have awareness in the process. And so it's not about running, it's about increasing your awareness. And if you do that, for me, that's the best of all worlds, when you're moving your body and it's helping you develop awareness, because then your body feels good, your mind is refreshed, your spirit is enlivened, and you're just really connected to life. And that's Fit Soul Fit Body. It actually just came out as an audiobook. So people who like audiobooks, you can check it out as an audiobook also.
Yeah. I did see that it just came out. I have the hard copy, but I did see it just came out as an audio book also, everybody. So great. Did you read it?
Did I read it? I wrote it.
No, I mean in the audio version.
Oh, no. We had somebody read it, because we decided to go with a professional. I'm I can speak, but I can't read and talk at the same time. I'm like a dumb athlete, you know, I can't chew gum and walk. So it's hard for me to actually read without stumbling. And it's funny because, you know, Ironman has had me do a number of presentations at the welcome banquet in Kona, and you know, sort of just to inspire the athletes and talk about the theme that they've chosen that year. And I've done it maybe 3 or 4 different years. And when I'm thinking about it, I lay out how the talk is going to go in my mind. And when I get up there and I speak, it just flows. And then one year they wanted me to write down the speech before I gave it so that they could coordinate it with the video people. I'm like, you want me to write down what I'm going to say? And they go, yeah, we need to see what you're going to say. And I'm like, okay, I will do it. But I said, this will be hard for me because my brain, when I'm up there, will be trying to read those words and then translate it into sound. Reading and sound, it's like 2 different languages.
Yeah.
And so even though I don't think anybody else noticed it, it was really hard for me because if it's laid out, if the talk is laid out in my brain, it's like I'm fluent. If I'm trying to remember something that I wrote, I'm having to go from a visual thing to an auditory thing. And it's like having to translate from French to English in your brain. You're not just fluent in it. So anyway, I don't know what that had to do with anything. Oh, because
yeah,
I have a hard time reading and speaking what I'm reading. I'd stumble.
it's a bit of a different skill. It really is. Yeah, I went to the studio and recorded my book a little bit, and it's different.
I could never be a newscaster and read off the prompter.
That'd
I'd
be
be
hard.
stumbling.
Yeah.
Can you back up a little bit? What did I? Oh.
But I would like to, before we move on here, I would like to reiterate what you just said about awareness and moving your body and not getting injured, because I just can't communicate and emphasize enough that awareness, you might be, I sometimes relate it to, let's say you're hitting your finger with a hammer, you're hitting your thumb with a hammer over and over, and it hurts. And then if you stop, it doesn't hurt. And you can do a certain pattern that you're not aware of that hurts. And it's just amazing what awareness can do. More than people think, more than you think, I think. But I just wanted to reiterate that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. A lot of times we have this vague feeling that something's not right in our life, but until we have enough awareness to either figure out where that feeling is coming from or what situation caused it, it's just like this dull thing, like something's not right. Maybe it's the way you approach a problem, or a sense of not being fulfilled. And until there's that awareness of, well, what would be fulfilling? Wow, I never asked myself that question before. All I know is that I'm not fulfilled. I don't like my job. I don't like whatever. And I'm not being unrealistic. I just don't like it. It's not me. It's not calling me. And so then it's like, maybe you do need some of that personal time to reflect and go, well, what is important to me? What would be fulfilling? What journey could I embark on that ultimately, it doesn't matter what the end result is. It's just that the journey itself will be something each and every day that I can look back at the end of the day and go, great, I did that for myself. I did that as a way to learn something. I did that as a way to affirm that I can take a positive step each and every day, each and every day of my life. Maybe the step I took today wasn't as big as the one that I took last week, but who cares? I still took that step. And so, you know, definitely awareness is key. One of the keys in the book that I feel can lead to awareness, the key is called quiet your mind in our book, Fit Soul, Fit Body.
Yeah.
I try to practice that, and that seems to be where awareness comes for me. When I get my mind to be quiet, then it's like I'm open to all opportunities and experiences in life. when I'm thinking and analyzing, sometimes I might come up with a solution, but a lot of times all I do is think and analyze, and nothing comes. And then
Yeah.
if you can go,
It,
even in that quiet, there's a sense of fulfillment and peace.
yes. And it's been said that awareness exists in that gap between thinking and acting. And that's so the big deal is to inhibit ourselves enough so that we don't carry our thinking just immediately to acting. You know, there's some us in the middle of it. If that
That's a
makes
great line.
Yeah. So let me ask you, for anybody listening, just a little bit more about your coaching programs. And can you tell me, I know you have a lot of, say you have a marathon program, training plan, and you have different levels of triathlon training programs, and maybe swimming. I know you have some blogging about swimming and some swimming programs. If somebody signs up for a program, let's say the marathon training program might build you up to 50 miles a week. And that person has never run more than 30 or 40 miles a week in their life. Is that customizable, or how does that work?
Well, I have a couple marathon programs, some open water swimming programs, and those are more just kind of template guidelines. They're more general in nature. They're specific in the sense that the intensity levels are set by zones. So if you know what your zones are, it'll keep you from going too hard on the long days and hard enough on the faster days. But the real customized bread and butter work training that I provide is for triathletes specifically. And in those programs, everything is definitely customized to where you're starting from in your swimming, cycling, running. It's based on the heart rate zones are based on your age, your current fitness, your past training history. The whole programs are designed around key A races that you have. And then all of the training each day, if people have like a Garmin or a Polar that collects all their data, like their heart rate and their power on the bike and pace and all that kind of stuff, that uploads right into their schedule. I see every time anything gets uploaded, whether it's data from their devices or comments that they write into each one of the programs. And then I can just go through and basically each day look at what you're doing and make a quick comment on it, whether, hey, looks great, perfectly done, or, oh, you went a little too hard on that one. Were you with your group again, or, whatever. Yeah. And so it's a super interactive coaching in that people get my feedback, basically 7 days a week. And so it's a real good support for people. They like it because, one, it's based on all of the years and years of knowledge I gained from racing and then also from coaching people at many different levels. I coach athletes I coach only age group athletes. I love age group athletes. Pros are a pain in the ass. I have advised some pros over the years, but to actually train them on a day-to-day basis it's more than a full-time job. And I love age group athletes because they're doing it for the right reasons. They do it because they love it. It's fun. It's their community. They're testing themselves. They're surprising themselves with what they can do. And a lot of times, if an athlete has been training on their own, there's only maybe one or two things that they're doing wrong. And if you correct that, all of a sudden they go from here to here. And, the wow factor is big. They're like, wow, I can't believe I, improved by whatever. They think I'm a genius, but all I did is just change one or two things. So anyway, it's really fun. I enjoy that.
That is one of the questions.
Mark Allen Coaching. It's markallensports.com. You'll see there's information on the athletic coaching, the personal coaching, and a lot of other information.
Okay, so you just answered a couple questions. One is, I was pretty curious about the age group coaching. I know you love to do that because you've been saying that. And so I'll be 72 in April. So and my mind starts to go in that direction, the age group category.
Yeah.
So anyway, and you also said markallensports.com is where you can be contacted. So that answers that question. Maybe we can go back to it again in just a second. But so you have another book, The Art of Competition.
Mhm.
And there is a saying in the Feldenkrais method, particularly, but making the impossible possible, the possible easy, and the easy elegant. And I have said that to patients, and they just laugh. They don't understand that, life can have an element of elegance. And I love art that portrays activity in nature too. But can you talk about competition being art?
Well, competition can either be competition or it can be just a real expression of you perfecting yourself to the best level you can. And that's when it becomes art. And that's why I think a lot of racing that you see where like at Ironman, where if you're there and you see the age groupers finishing, coming across the finish line, that's inspiring because they have transformed themselves through that journey, and they really have created something that's a personal art piece of perfecting themselves to the best that they possibly could be on that day. And when they cross that line, when somebody has done that, it truly is inspiring. It doesn't matter the time or the place that they finish. And when somebody crosses the line and it's just about the numbers for them, it doesn't have the same energy. They just competed. They didn't fundamentally change who they are as a person. They may never look back and reflect and understand the lessons that they were taught out there on the race course during all of those hours competing by themselves. And so if someone can use sport and competition to learn lessons about life, that's when it becomes art. Yeah. And me personally, I've had 20, 30 years to think about a lot of the races that I did, especially the key ones like in Hawaii. And I'm still learning things from it, like, oh, wow, that's what I did then. And it's like, how can I still be learning something from that experience that I had so many years ago? But I am. And so that's where you turn competition into art also. It's like we all get the same canvas. We're all doing the same course, but we each have a different paintbrush and we have a different palette, and how we move through that course and what happens to us and what we overcome during the race and who we become because of the race is the art.
Yeah. Sport as a metaphor for life. And I think no matter, even if you're a spectator, say maybe you've never ice skated, but you watch the Winter Olympics, I think whether people realize it or not, that's exactly what they're really wanting to get out of that experience. Sometimes there's just pure entertainment value, but beyond that, you just marvel at what people are capable of. And that's what it's all about. So I hate to depart from this tone, but I have to ask you one more question here. And that is, when did you first meet Tommy Buzzcut?
Tommy Buzzcut. He just showed up at the door one day, and I was like, I was sitting there on that Marky Mark. He was just like sitting there eating a donut, and having a coffee and smoking a cigar. And all of a sudden, Tommy Buzzcut shows up and caught him red-handed with that cigar. And Tommy's like, he loves a cigar, so he's like, hey, Marky Mark. No, anyway, so Tommy Buzzcut, if you haven't seen Tommy Buzzcut, you can go on my YouTube channel, Mark Allen Coaching, and some of the videos, you'll see a character, and that's Tommy Buzzcut. It came about because during COVID, the Ironman wasn't going to take place in 2020. And so they wanted to do a virtual week where each day would be like an hour program online live, where it would be kind of like giving people a sampling of what would have been going on during each of those days during the week in October. And then, and so one of the features that they were going to do was with a guy named Matt Lieto, who was he was gonna do a parody called Between the Palms or something like that. That there's a guy, Zach, oh God, a comedian who interviews people in a very dry humor and makes fun of them, and they make fun of him. So he was going to be that character for Ironman, and he was going to interview people. And he and I have quite a funny rapport. Like when he's done interviews with me, I just get goofy. And so I thought, I'm going to create a character for this guy. So when he interviews me, it won't be me, it'll be, and I came up with this idea of this guy, Tommy Buzzcut, with, the little fedora hat and a bunch of, seed lays and, a muscle shirt and just goofy guy like I was just doing there. And they ended up not doing it because Matt got sick and he couldn't do that aspect of the program. But I ended up, during that week, the commentators, Dee Griesbauer and Michael Lovato, they were the hosts for this week-long hourly show that they were doing every day. And so they would do the show, and then I would do a Tommy Buzzcut parody on what they had talked about and post it later that day. And so I had seven of those throughout the week. And then it just became something that in some of the videos that I record for YouTube, I have Mondays with Mark Allen, and most recently one called Road to St. George, talking about going to St. George in May. But anyway, on a lot of the Mondays with Mark Allen, Mark, would just talk about things that are maybe a little more philosophical. And then I'd go, tell me, what do you think about that? And then I'd, cut in and do a thing with Tommy.
That's amazing. I don't know how you keep up that.
Not seen it, you will go, that Mark Allen dude, I thought he was normal, but now I can see he has a little brain damage from all those Ironmans he did.
Well, you keep that energy going for quite a while. But Tommy Buzzcut's very funny, but he always has a point too.
Yeah, I a lot of times I feel like I can relay a message through humor much easier than I can by trying to say it straight.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when a message is relayed with humor, it goes in so much easier also to the person listening.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, humor opens us up. It makes you feel good.
It does.
You laugh and you feel good.
I'll tell you what, I just laughed. And the other thing that makes me laugh really hard during the day is my dog.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's just a couple things in life that really make you laugh. But anyway, Mark, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome, Scott. Great conversation. Thanks.